I'm Austin Walker, and this is Waypoint Presents. Vice's home for the most exciting stories in gaming. We take you behind the scenes.
You gotta be a little crazy, you know, if you want to be the best.
Into the arena. To the heart of why we play. Tonight, we show you what it takes to put the finishing touches on two of the most surprising indie hits of last year. In our first story, we find Alex and his team in the final days leading up to the launch of Hyper Light Drifter, a very personal game inspired by his lifelong struggle with heart disease. For the developers of Super Hypercube, one of the best VR games ever, it was a waiting game. They had the idea, they just needed the technology to catch up. Both let us in to share their stories as the clock ticked toward the deadline for release.
I am the creator of Heart Machine and Hyper Light Drifter. The story of the game is that you're in this ruinous world, like something terrible has happened, and the character that you're playing as has a horrible illness that he's been dealing with and is dying from, and so he's seeking out a cure, like any self-preserving creature would do. The purpose is to find that cure, but don't know if you find it or not in the game. I think I have an unnatural amount of motivation, and I think a lot of that stems from the fact that I could die at any moment. Those are things that I am invested in for very obvious reasons, and why not put yourself into your art and make it more personal, because for me that's always the most interesting art. I started working on this back in early 2013, just loose sketches and some rough ideas and poking around in really crummy game engines. Got very serious about it when Bo Blythe, one of the main programmers on the project, ended up joining up.
It seemed like he was taking a lot of inspiration from like his own life and his own trials and stuff. I think people respond to like that kind of auteurship. You feel like you're having more of a conversation with like this person.
We worked together until I launched the Kickstarter in late 2013, and then that exploded. It was beyond my expectations as far as reaction goes.
Alex has always had a pretty strong idea of what he wants, but what people got from the Kickstarter was like this world. They know what the character looks like, and then they know the feeling of this world. What do you want people to take away from this? How can we make sure they understand what's happening with the character, especially when there's no words in the game? It's a really tough process when you're down on the ground to keep coming up and being like, do people understand what is going on?
The game is an action-adventure RPG, and I've gone to great lengths to create an aesthetic that is unique to me and to my tastes. Very neon and pink and lots of bright colors, because I enjoy color. And then as far as like the mechanics and the way that it functions, it's a lot of different things working together in tandem from bits and pieces of games that I love and trying to make that its own thing. It's my childhood and all of my interests converging. You could consider a game like a modern opera, where the biggest, scariest factor is the interactive component. And it's sometimes hard to grapple with because each user is going to experience a game in a different way. It's March 8th now, and we've been planning to release March 31st. It's kind of a daily gut check as far as, can we make this timeline? That's scary. I can handle pressure better than most because I have larger concerns with my health. I was born with a congenital heart condition. Recently, I had to have a valve placed into my chest, which was a lot of fun. These are all my pills, and I usually try and swallow them all at once. It's really not that bad. This is what sustains me for most of the day. I don't really care about food, because food doesn't like me very much. So, you food. This is Petrus, my dog. She grunts like a piglet. Like that.
That was actually a huge bonding experience for me and Alex growing up, was gaming. Alex is my cousin on my mom's side, and basically he's like a brother to me. There's an extreme amount of suffering that comes from being so dedicated to making a product that's as perfect as you want it to be. And actually, it couldn't have come in a better time considering where he was before he really started that whole process and during with his health. that really allowed him a lot of perspective and drove home some convictions that if he might die, he wanted to make something that he was extremely proud of that he could share with the world.
Alex has, in his relatively young life, has lived through a lot of stuff that most of us don't have to deal with until we get into our 60s or 70s. You know, he is surviving and getting by, but I do think that he feels that there's a guillotine hanging above his head, and at any moment, something could happen and it could drop. He's almost like a walking dark comedy. And he'll come in and he'll seem depressed at first, but then he will say these really funny things. The day after we replaced his valve, and I was showing him how the balloon was sort of moving back and forth in his pulmonary artery, and he essentially said, "Oh gosh, it looks like you were fisting my heart." Sorry. That's what he said, which I thought was pretty funny for a patient to say about his own heart.
Can we review what we did last week? Because last week was kind of a good one also. You ended up getting YYC to work because Russell fixed it after I sat with him for 6 hours in the morning.
Worst case scenario crashes.
Yeah, and has a massive memory leak.
We're so close to releasing it. We're like, no, this needs to be in, or this doesn't work, or we have to add this.
Get back to work. We're going through and we're playtesting as much as we can personally to be like, what would a user do here? And we tried 100 different ways in this one level with this one enemy. And then you have to do that with every single object in the game. So it becomes this exponentially difficult thing to manage in a lot of ways. Somebody else want to play? I don't want to play because I know all these things by heart. Like, it's just so much iteration over the course of years. Like, why the do I do this sometimes? I wonder. But days like today, which are ultimately good, I keep going because when we sit together and play the game, it's a happy experience. I've been doing this for 2.5 years almost now, and there's a lot of times where I'm trying to balance the health stuff, not kill myself, literally, and also run the team and do the things that I need to do on the project to get it done. It's been a massive balancing act. Sometimes I'm not even sure how I got through it to this point. Today's our launch. Well, technically midnight, so I include it as today. I want to get done, and I don't want to waste any time. We had our announcement trailer last week go up to announce the actual release date of the 31st, which was scary in itself because, like, even a week ago, I was like, are we going to be done on the 31st? I don't know if that's possible. Everyone on the team is tired. I think Sean didn't sleep yesterday. I think he's probably sleeping right now. We still have a bunch to do before we can actually make a build. Once we make a build, probably around 4 or 5 o'clock this afternoon, probably start to upload it to whatever digital platforms that we have to do it on. It always comes down to the wire, so who the knows if that's a real timeline? I just feel tense, mostly.
I feel like I'm hallucinating, but you gotta do what you gotta do.
I was working on a credit sequence because before it was one giant block of text that slowed down our engine game maker. So I had to like recode that. It was pretty stressful.
Can I see the big block?
Yeah, the big block is this.
Okay.
It's split into two, so.
Yeah, that looks good. We have a lot of different things that we have to get done, and we don't have a lot of bodies or manpower to do it. What is that?
That's the mouse cursor.
Whoa. Yeah, you're not using the ones that I made, which are these, which is the whole purpose.
Do you want that changed?
Kinda, yeah. It's super intense right now. It's like, well, where do we want to spend these last hours? So we were planning on having a build up at 5, but we ran into a host of issues. We're not on schedule, but we're not dying or anything. We'll know pretty soon if we're gonna have a working build. Does it work?
Seemingly.
Does the video play?
Yep.
Yes.
We're uploading the game to GOG's server. The uploading says it's going to take 11 hours, so we don't have that time, so I'm going to connect into an Ethernet cable.
What does yours say, 400 hours?
6 hours.
Yeah, we should launch in 6 hours. It's our dumb fault for trying to launch on so many platforms at once. Hey, no yawning.
Oh, entity's done uploading.
We get to release our game. Okay.
Are you ready?
Are you ready?
Click the button.
Click
Click the button. Click the button.
Oh, we're releasing it! Deep breath. How does this work?
Okay, you got it. 2, 1.
It's an amazing thing to watch this come to life and to see all the effort that we've poured into it over the years and just like see every little component that like Teddy and Bo and Sean and just like everybody through the years has contributed to this, and watching that all come together into something that actually makes sense. That's the most magical experience that I can have. I don't know. It's like giving birth to a weird, deformed digital child or something.
When the current wave of VR started happening, and we're trying all the demos are very simple, right? It's just you're in a house. Whoa, look at this house that I'm in right now, or like you're in space or you're underwater. And I was like, this is really cool. This is kind of what this new medium is about. It's about more experiential, kind of contemplative experiences. And then immediately I was like, yeah, but how do you make an arcade game? How do you make something like score-driven that is like a classic video game? Because I thought that's harder. It's like, how do you make a game that will make you come back to it, that will be addictive, that you'll want to get good at, that has like a skill to it? And we had this thing that existed for years, Super Hypercube. And it would just immediately click like, oh, this is what we should do. Let's start working.
It's very hard to describe this game. In one sense, you can describe the gameplay. The two kind of, I think, key points that tend to work with people overall is this relationship of it to that Japanese game show Hole in the Wall in terms of the gameplay.
Video games is always what I wanted to do my whole life. There was no doubt that that was the job I wanted. I started at Ubisoft in Montreal and was very quickly delusionized. Is that the word? Yeah. I saw how the hot dog gets made, basically, and it was hard to stomach. Like, my lifelong dream of working at a studio very quickly became like, oh, it's just kind of a sweatshop. And at the time, like, the music scene in Montreal was like super vibrant. Like, all this stuff was happening and like just amazing shows and parties everywhere all the time. And it was like, why is there nothing like that in video games? Like, there's nobody getting together after hours to make cool, you know, outside of the office. And we realized that there was just this hole that needed to be filled. So we started organizing the Gamma events to kind of fulfill that position. It was a little bit like a game jam where we would issue a theme and a challenge that would be built around some kind of technical limitation. And the third year, the challenge was design a game that uses anaglyphic, red-blue, stereoscopic glasses, somehow designed meaningfully around that. Like, can you make something that requires stereoscopy to make sense? And we found that it's very difficult to design for stereoscopy in a way that is meaningful. So we cheated a little bit and we added the concept of head tracking to stereoscopy with these things. Based on the Johnny Lee Wiimote hack, it was this guy who created like a really lo-fi way of doing head tracking using a Wiimote. And by doing that, it creates like this kind of magic mirror effect into the screen where as you move your head, the perspective in the game adjusts itself to match your position, and it just looks like a hologram. And that created like a depth effect. It was really convincing, and it was basically VR without VR. But the game itself didn't have any colors because that red-blue stereoscopy will be more effective if it's against gray colors.
We were so limited in terms of what it could actually look like. It ends up taking this very almost stark brutalist. It looks like something like from a Soviet satellite that's been rescued, somehow have kind of remediated into a game. There's something really beautifully ugly about it, actually.
The Hypercube was a little side project. You know, we only had 2 or 3 months to develop it before the event. And then after the event, we didn't keep working on it. Like, we showed it at parties, but it was always that same version. And that version just lay dormant for a number of years until the Oculus Rift first came out, the first version, which didn't do head tracking. The Oculus DK1 only had, like, the gyroscopes. It didn't track your movement at all. And that's when we started talking to Sony. We got in touch with them. It was like, yours does head tracking, right? And it's like, yeah, no problem. And then we started developing that version in earnest. Like, okay, now we have the hardware works. Technology is finally caught up to our original idea. We've got all the pieces. Let's start working.
And I did all the sound design for the game. There isn't really music per se. Like, the game itself has a rhythm to it. And so to have just canned music going that has its own tempo, that has its own rhythm, doesn't make sense. Like, it clashes with the actual rhythm of the gameplay.
The other thing about the current VR technology is that we're not limited to the anaglyphic 3D anymore. So it opened up what the environment could look and feel like, which for me was the most important thing about bringing it into VR in the first place.
It comes back to what I was saying earlier, in that VR has a certain nostalgic aspect for me. It's kind of retro-futuristic, almost by nature. And then very quickly the idea became, what if VR was like a viable technology in the late 70s, early 80s? Like the computer interfaces in old movies, when you see like the targeting computer in Star Wars, or the neon streets of Blade Runner, that kind of grain and warmth.
Most of that design was a collaborative process. We had images that we brought forward. So in particular, my one I was always championing, because it's so ridiculous, is Xanadu. Xanadu was my one where I was like, yes, this game looks like this really terrible roller skating movie from the late 80s. This feels like it's the right sort of direction to be in. Also, the various levels that draw upon James Turrell's work has always been my favorite part of the game. And just having a VR environment where it felt perceptually different, like felt like I was completely and utterly in an alien space. That just seemed way more interesting to me than trying to kind of recreate an actual space. And that's what we got with this one that we could not get with the other technologies. I'm a little bit concerned about this reemergence of VR in terms of its like long-term viability. It's, I think, an uphill battle to show people what you can actually do with the technology. People aren't sure why they would want it yet. And that maybe VR's time will be the next time it comes around, when it's a little bit cheaper, when it's a little bit more accessible for people overall.
I think the PSVR has a real shot of being the one device that kind of democratizes the idea of VR to the masses. The same way that, you know, iPhones, when iPhones first came out, people were like, what's the point? Like, I just need to make calls and send text. Why would I need a portable computer in there? And now it's like, well, you know, everybody has an iPhone. I'm hoping that VR becomes that ubiquitous. Like, VR is not a new console for video games. It's not a new platform. It's just a new interface. And you will be able to apply anything to that interface.
So 6, 7 years in the making. I think it just occurred to me that we're done the game. Like, we officially pressed the button a few days ago, but now it feels like it's actually really out there. It's fantastic.
It's so exciting to think we're one of the very first titles ever to come out for this new kind of video game, like, that's thrilling.
Thanks for watching Waypoint Presents. Next week, we move from the game developers to the players and dive into one of the most intense rivalries between two of esports' best.